Welcome, dear listener, to another dreamy evening with SleepyTime Stories. Tonight, close your eyes, take a calming breath, and let yourself drift softly into a magical world of gentle forests, brave hearts, and clever little heroes. Let's begin. Tom Tit Tot. Once upon a time, there was a woman who baked 5 pies. And when they came out of the oven, they were so overbaked, the crusts were too hard to eat. So she turned to her daughter and said, "Daughter," says she, "put them their pies on the shelf, and leave them there little, and they'll come again." She meant, that the crusts would soften. But the girl, she said to herself, "Well, if they'll come again, I'll eat them now." And she set to work and ate them all, one after another, first and last. Well, come supper time, the woman said, "Go you and get one o' them their pies. I dare say they've come again now." The girl went and looked, and there was nothing but the empty dishes. So back she came and said, "No, they ain't come again, not one of 'em," says the mother. "Not one of 'em," says she. "Well, come again or not come again," said the woman, "I'll have one for supper." "But you can't, if they ain't come," says the girl. "But I can," says she. "Go you and bring the best of them, best or worse," says the girl. "I've ate them all, and you can't have one till that's come again." Well, the woman, she was stunned, and she took her spinning to the door to sit outside and spin. And as she span, she sang, "My daughter ha ate five pies today. My daughter ha ate five pies today." Now the king was riding down the street, and he heard her sing. But what she sang he couldn't quite make out. So he stopped his horse and said, "What was that you were singing, my good woman?" The woman was ashamed to admit what her daughter had done, so instead she sang, "My daughter has spun five skeins today. My daughter has spun five skeins today." "Stars o' mine," said the king, "I never heard tell of any girl that could do that." And then he said, "Look you here, I want a wife, and I'll marry your daughter, but," says he, "11 months out of the year she shall have all she likes to eat, and all the gowns she likes to get, and all the company she likes to keep. But the last month of the year she'll have to spin 5 skeins every day, and if she don't, I shall kill her." "All right," says the woman, for she thought what a grand match it would be. And as for the 5 skeins, surely there'd be a way out of it, and likeliest he'd forget all about it. Well, so they were married, and for 11 months the girl had all she liked to eat, all the gowns she liked to wear, and all the company she liked to keep. But when the time was near over, she began to think of the skeins, and to wonder if the king remembered. But not a word did he say, and she hoped he had forgotten. But the last day of the last month, he took her to a room she had never seen before. There was nothing inside but a spinning wheel and a stool. And he said, "Now, my dear, starting tomorrow, you shall be shut in here with some food and some flax. And if you haven't spun 5 skeins by night, your head shall go off." And away he went about his business. Well, she was that frightened. She had always been such a gatless girl, she didn't even know how to spin. What was she to do tomorrow, shut up with no one to help her? She sat down on the kitchen stool, and oh, how she did cry. But all of a sudden she heard herself tapping at the door, low down near the floor. She got up and opened it, and what should she see but a little black creature, no bigger than her knee, with a long tail curling behind it. It looked up at her curiously and said, "What are you crying for? What's that to you?" says she. "Never you mind," says the little thing, "but tell me, what are you crying for?" "That won't do me no good," says she. "You don't know that," it said, and twirled its tail round and round. "Well," says she, "it won't do no harm if it don't do no good." And she told it everything about the pies, the king, the marriage, and the spinning skeins. "This is what I'll do," says the little black thing. "I'll come to your window every morning, take the flax, and bring it back spun each night. What's your pay? Says she. It looked at her sideways, then said, You shall have 3 guesses every night to guess my name. And if you haven't guessed it before the month's up, you shall be mine. Well, she thought she'd surely guess it before the month ended. All right, says she, I agree. All right, says it, and lo, how that tail did twirl. Well, the next day her husband took her into the room, a room she'd never seen before. There in the middle stood nothing but a spinning wheel and a plain wooden stool beside it. And the king said in a quiet, cold voice, Now, my dear, here's where you'll stay tomorrow. I'll leave you with food and flax, and if 5 skeins aren't spun by nightfall, off comes your head. And with that, he turned and left, locking the heavy door behind him. The girl just stood there, stunned. The stool, the spinning wheel, the pile of flax, they seemed to blur together as tears welled up in her eyes. She stumbled back to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She'd never spun a thread in her life. How on earth was she going to spin 5 skeins every day for a whole month? She dropped onto a stool near the hearth, buried her face in her hands, and began to cry. Hard, hopeless tears. She wept until the room around her faded, until her sobs echoed through the kitchen. But just then, she heard a gentle knocking, low and soft, right at the bottom of the back door. Startled, she sniffed and opened it slowly. There, at the step, stood the strangest little creature she had ever seen. No taller than her knee, with skin like black ash, a long pointed nose, and a tail that twitched and curled behind him. He looked up at her, curious. Then, in a voice thin and creaky, he asked, What are you crying for? She blinked, still sniffling. What's that to you? She muttered. But the little thing just tilted its head and said again, Tell me what you're crying for. She hesitated. What did it matter now? No good, she sighed, if I do. The little creature's eyes twinkled. You don't know that, he said, and he gave his tail a whirl. Something about his voice was strange and not cruel, not kind, but full of mischief. The girl looked down at him, then said, Well, I suppose there's no harm in telling. So she told him everything. About the pies, about the lie, about the king and the promise, and about the 5 skeins she couldn't spin if her life depended on it. When she finished, the little creature grinned. I'll tell you what, he said. I'll come to your window each morning, take the flax, and I'll bring it back spun each night. She stared at him. Why would you do that? She asked. He looked at her sideways, his voice curling like smoke. You give me 3 guesses every night to guess my name, and if you don't guess it before the month is up, you'll be mine. She froze. Yours? What do you mean, mine? But the little man just smiled wider, his tail flicking behind him. He didn't explain, but something in her gut told her she didn't want to find out. Still, what choice did she have? She couldn't spin, and if she didn't, she'd be dead. So she swallowed, took a breath, and nodded. All right, she whispered. I agree. The creature's eyes flashed. All right, he said, and he twirled his tail so fast it looked like a wheel itself. Then he was gone. The next morning, the king brought her to the lock spinning room again. There was the stool, the spinning wheel, a pile of flax, and a tray of food. 5 skeins by tonight, he said, or you know what happens. He gave her a tight smile and shut the door with a click. She waited and waited, and then right on cue came a tap at the window. She rushed over and opened it. there was the little black creature again. "Flax?" he asked, holding out his hands. Wordless, she gave him the bundle, and off he went, vanishing into the morning mist. The girl sat all day by the window, chewing her nails, racking her brain for strange names. By nightfall, the tap came again. She opened the window, and the creature handed her 5 perfect skeins. "Now," he said, eyes glittering. "What's my name?" She gulped. "Is it Bill?" "No, it ain't," he said, and twirled his tail. "Is it Nat?" "No, it ain't," he said again, spinning faster. "Mark?" "No, that ain't," he said, and with a whirl and a puff of wind, he vanished into the dark. When the king returned, the skeins lay neatly on the stool. He raised his eyebrows. "Impressive," he said. "You may just keep your head another day." And with a nod, he left again. But the girl, she sat on the edge of her stool long after he was gone, thinking and thinking. She had no idea what that creature's name was, and she only had 30 nights to find it out. One wrong guess after another, and when the month was up, she would be his. But what did that even mean? She wasn't sure, but she knew she wouldn't like it. Not one bit. The days dwindled down. The girl could feel the clock ticking louder with every passing hour. Outside, the snow began to fall in little spirals, and inside, her heart beat just as fast as the twirling tail she saw each night. Each morning she woke up with dread. Each evening she faced the knock at the window with fear. For night after night, that little black creature came, always grinning, always spinning, always demanding she guess its name. And every time she guessed wrong. "Is it Jabez? No, is it Humphrey? No, is it Balthazar?" No, the little creature laughed wickedly, its tail whipping behind it like a whip in the wind. Only 2 days left now. She began to despair. And that night, as she sat alone, staring out at the moonlight, she whispered, "How can I escape something I can't name?" But just then, she remembered something, a voice. A song. Yes, it was the king's voice from outside her door. He had been laughing about something. What was it he'd said? Where had he been? She closed her eyes and whispered, trying to remember. A wind hunting chalk pit, spinning wheel singing, her heart jumped. Yes, that was it. He had found a strange creature in the woods, and it had been singing something, spinning something. She held her breath. "Nimmy nimmy not." And then she whispered the rest of my name's tum tit tot. She opened her eyes, wide as saucers. Was it true? Was that really the name? She dared not hope, but it was the first time she had something more than a guess. The final day came, cold and grey. The king led her to the spinning room. This time his face showed nothing. Not coldness, not kindness, just the weight of duty. "There's your flax," he said. 5 skeins by nightfall. He turned and left, his boots echoing down the hallway until the door clicked shut and the key turned in the lock. She sat still, hardly breathing. Then, like a whisper through the window, came the tap at the window. Tap, tap, tap. She stood, heart thumping, and opened the window. There it was. The little black creature, sitting on the sill, smiling wider than ever. He stepped into the room this time, his tiny boots leaving no sound on the wooden floor. "I've come for the flax," it said. "This is the final day. After this," it grinned, "you'll belong to me." She handed over the flax silently. Not a word, not a blink. The imp took it all and vanished in a puff of dark air. The sun began to set. A single candle flickered in the room, casting long shadows on the walls. And then tap, 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 the girl stood and opened the window once more. There it stood again, holding 5 gleaming skeins in its spindly arms. Its eyes sparkled. Its grin stretched ear to ear. It laid the skeins on the table, then turned toward her. "Well, my sweet girl," it whispered, "this is your last chance. 3 guesses," it hissed, "and if you don't get it right," its grin turned sinister. "You're mine." She nodded calmly, took a breath, and then said, "Is it Solomon?" The imp snorted. "No," it said, taking a step closer. "Is it Zebedee?" The creature's eyes glowed. "No," it said again, closer still, so close she could feel its breath on her cheek. It raised its arms, claws outstretched. "One last guess, woman," it rasped. "Say it wrong and your soul is mine." The girl backed up 1 step. She pointed at the imp with a trembling hand, and with a voice full of steel said, "Nimmy nimmy not, your name's Tit Tot." There was silence, for a heartbeat, and another, and then a scream, a sound like iron tearing through the sky. The creature leapt into the air, howling in fury. Its tail spun like a hurricane. Its eyes turned red as coals. "You witchhood," it screamed. "You tricked me, you spied on me." And with a flash of lightning, a blast of wind, and a loud pop, Tit Tot vanished into the shadows, never to be seen again. The door burst open. The king stood there, sword in hand, ready for anything. But what he saw stopped him in his tracks. His wife, calm and tall, stood beside 5 perfect skeins. And the room? Still, peaceful, safe. He looked into her eyes. She looked into his. And for the first time, they saw each other, truly saw each other. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." From that day forward, there was no more talk of spinning, no more threats, no more locked rooms. Only laughter and long walks and warm fires. The girl who once feared a name now had a name of her own, Queen. And though the kingdom whispered of a strange creature who once demanded names in the dark, no one ever saw Tit Tot again. But sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind blew against the castle walls at night, the queen would close her eyes and swear she heard a whisper, "Nimmy nimmy not." But she smiled and knew she was safe. Forever. The 3 sillies once upon a time in a quiet village nestled among green fields and gentle hills, there lived a simple farmer and his wife. They were humble folks, not rich, not poor, but always content with the little they had. And they had a daughter, a kind girl with rosy cheeks, a soft voice, and a dreamy heart that wandered far beyond the village fences. Now, this daughter had begun to be courted by a fine young gentleman, a suitor from beyond their town. He was polite and well dressed, always arriving in the evening with a flower or 2, a quiet smile, and eyes full of admiration. Each night, after finishing their simple supper of warm bread and stew, the family would sit around the fire, and the young man would join them telling stories or listening to the wind hum through the shutters. And every evening, just before the meal, the girl would go down into the cellar to draw the beer, a simple task, done without a fuss. But on this particular evening, something peculiar happened. She took the jug and candle, tiptoed down the wooden stairs and into the cool, stone-walled cellar below. There, as usual, was the great beer barrel, standing solemn and round in its corner. She placed her jug beneath the tap, turned the handle, and as the golden liquid began to flow, she happened to glance up at the ceiling above. And there, right above her head, embedded deep in a beam of old oak, was something she had never noticed before. A heavy mallet, just stuck there, lodged up high in the wood, still and silent, as if it had been waiting there for years watching. The girl's eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat, and suddenly her imagination ran wild. She thought, "Oh dear, suppose I marry this gentleman, and we have a baby, and that baby grows up to be a young man, tall and strong like his father. And one day he comes down into the cellar, just like I did, to draw the beer, and he stands just where I'm standing. And that mallet, that horrid, dangerous mallet, falls from the beam above and strikes him on the head. Oh no, it could kill him, our only child, gone just like that." And with that awful thought, her knees buckled beneath her. She dropped the candle and the jug, and sat right down on the cellar steps sobbing. Tears poured down her cheeks. The beer ran over the floor forgotten, and the mallet still hung silently above. Now upstairs, the mother and father sat waiting by the fire. The stew was getting cold. The bread had been sliced, and still the girl had not come back with the beer. So the mother said, "I'll go see what's keeping her." Down the stairs she went, her slippers tapping gently on the wood. And there, by the flickering light of the fallen candle, she found her daughter, sobbing on the step, with beer pooling around her shoes. "Whatever's the matter?" the mother cried. "Oh, mother," said the girl, pointing up. "Look, there's a horrid mallet stuck in the beam. Suppose I marry my gentleman, and we have a son, and he grows tall and handsome, and one day he comes down here to draw the beer, and that mallet falls and kills him dead. Oh, mother, what a dreadful, dreadful thing that would be." The mother gasped, clapped her hands to her cheeks, and sat right down beside her daughter. "Oh, my dear," she cried, "what a terrible thing indeed. How could we live with ourselves?" And so the two of them sat crying in the dock, the beer still flowing, the mallet still hanging. Time passed, and now the father upstairs grew worried. The supper was cold, the bread untouched. So down he went into the cellar to see what had happened. And there he found his wife and daughter side by side, crying their hearts out, and the beer still spilling over the floor. "Whatever is going on?" he asked. "Oh," said the mother, pointing upwards. Look at that dreadful mallet. Suppose our daughter marries her sweetheart, and they have a child, and that child grows up and comes down here, just like this, and that mallet falls and strikes him dead. Oh, what a dreadful thing." The father looked up and looked down, and his face turned pale. "Oh my," he whispered, "what a dreadful, dreadful thing that would be indeed." And down he sat right next to them and cried. Now all this time the gentleman had been sitting patiently in the kitchen, his stomach growling, wondering where the beer had gone. After waiting quite long enough, he decided to see for himself. He walked down the cellar stairs and found the three of them, father, mother, and daughter, sitting on the floor, crying and wailing as beer pooled around their feet. The candle flickered low. The air smelled of barley and tears. "What in the world is happening?" he asked. They told him the story about the mallet and the imaginary baby and the dreadful fate that could befall him. And when they were done, he simply stood there. And then he laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but a long, hearty, kind laugh. And he reached up with one hand and pulled the mallet out of the beam. "There," he said. "Now no one needs to worry again." He paused, then said, "I've traveled many places in my life, but never have I met three such remarkable people." And then he added, "I'll go out now and search the world. If I can find three bigger sillies than you three, I'll come back and marry your daughter." And with that, he wished them goodbye, tipped his hat, and left. So off the gentleman went, down the village road, past the hedges humming with bees, past the stone fences speckled with moss, and into the wide world in search of sillier folks than the three he'd just left behind. He didn't know where he was going, but he trusted the road. And after walking for a long while, his boots dusty, his heart curious, he came upon a little cottage, one with a roof so low you could touch it from the garden path. But that wasn't the strange part. No, it was the cow. Yes, a big brown cow, standing in front of the cottage, blinking up at the roof. And next to it, a woman with a bundle of rope in her hands, coaxing, tugging, whispering softly, "Go on now, darling, you can do it." Nice and easy, the gentleman blinked. He stepped closer and asked, "Excuse me, madam, what are you doing with your cow in that ladder?" The woman turned and smiled. "Oh," she said, as if it were the most natural thing, "just getting her up onto the roof." "The roof," said the gentleman. "Yes," she nodded. "There's some lovely green grass growing up there, soft, fresh, perfect for grazing, and it's too much bother to bring it down, so I'm sending her up to eat it." The gentleman opened his mouth, but the woman held up the rope proudly. "Don't you worry," she said. "I've thought of everything. Once I get her up, I'll tie this rope round her neck, pass it down the chimney, and tie the other end to my wrist. That way, if she slips, I'll feel the tug and pull her back." She smiled. The cow blinked. The rope dangled. The gentleman was speechless. But the woman was already urging the poor cow up the ladder, one hoof at a time, as it moved in gentle protest. He watched as she tied the rope, fed it down the chimney, and then went into the house, looping the end to her wrist as she bustled about. Now the gentleman had barely walked a quarter mile further when he heard a crash, then a moo, then the thump, then a scream, and finally silence. He turned back. He ran, and when he reached the cottage he found the poor cow hanging halfway down the roof, strangled by the rope, and the woman stuck halfway up the chimney, sit from head to toe, her arms flailing helplessly. Oh, she had been pulled right up by the weight of the cow, and there she was, squeezed tight in the flue, shouting for help through a cloud of ashes. The gentleman shook his head slowly. "One silly down," he whispered. "Two to go." And with a heavy heart and blackened boots, he walked on. By evening, he came to a small inn by the roadside, a cozy little place with a wooden sign that creaked in the wind, and a chimney that puffed soft, sleepy smoke. It was full at night, and the only room left had two beds. The innkeeper said, "You'll be sharing with another traveler, but he's a pleasant fellow." So the gentleman agreed. He went up, unpacked his satchel, and soon after, the second man entered, a cheerful fellow with bright eyes and a spring in his step. They talked a bit, shared some bread, and then got ready for bed. The gentleman turned his back, removing his boots. But when he turned back around, he froze. The other man was standing across the room. His trousers were hanging on the knobs of the chest of drawers, and he was running at them. Again and again he'd run, jump into the air, and try to land inside his trousers. And every time he missed. He'd trip, stumble, nearly fall, then try again. At last, panting and red-faced. He wiped his forehead with a cloth and said, "Oh dear, these trousers are the most awkward invention. It takes me forever to get into them every morning. How do you manage it?" The gentleman couldn't help it. He burst out laughing. Then he gently picked up the trousers, opened the waistband, and stepped in just like a normal person. The other man stared, then clapped his hands with delight. "Oh, so that's how it's done. Thank you ever so much. You've saved me half my morning from now on." The gentleman simply smiled. That, he thought, makes two. The next morning, the sun rose bright and warm. Birds sang from the trees. The gentleman had a bit of porridge, then set off again, boots polished, mind alert. By midday, he arrived at a quiet village, and as he approached the edge, he saw a crowd gathering beside a pond. Farmers, children, old women, all with rakes, brooms, and long sticks in hand, poking at the water. He walked closer. "What's the trouble?" he asked. One man, holding a rake, pointed at the pond. "Can't you see?" he said. "The moon's fallen in. It's right there in the middle of the water. We're trying to fish her out." The gentleman blinked, and there, reflected in the still surface of the pond, was a full round moon glowing quietly in the sky above. He looked up, then back down, then up again. He tried to explain. "It's only the reflection," he said. "The moon's still up there in the sky. What you see here is just the water's mirror." But the villagers shook their heads. They accused him of being foolish, even rude, and they waved their rakes and brooms at him until he stepped back and left them to it, still jabbing at moonlight. The gentleman walked away, smiling, and then he laughed aloud. "Well," he said, "that makes three." He turned around, headed back to the village, back to the little farm where the daughter still waited, perhaps crying just a little over the mallet that never fell. And when he arrived, he greeted the family. He said, "I've traveled far and wide, and I've met people stranger than I ever dreamed, but never have I found three folks more wonderfully silly than the three of you." And with that, he asked the daughter once more, "Will you marry me now?" She nodded. The mother cried again. The father clapped his hands. And so they were married, and if they didn't live happily ever after, well, that's no business of yours or mine. The Rose Tree Part 1. A mother's cruelty, a brother's grief. Once upon a time, in a quiet little village nestled between misty hills and whispering woods, there lived a man, his daughter, and his second wife. The man was kind and gentle, the daughter sweet as springtime, with hair like golden wheat and eyes soft as a dove's. But the second wife, oh, she was bitter, jealous, and cruel. The daughter was not her own, and no matter how good the girl tried to be, the stepmother's heart grew darker within her each day. The girl reminded her of beauty, of love, of the first wife long gone but not forgotten. And so, the stepmother made the child do all the work. Day after day, the girl swept and scrubbed, carried water, made bread, and mended old clothes. And though her hands were sore and her back ached, she never once complained. She sang as she worked, her soft voice floating through the air like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. But the more the girl smiled, the more the woman hated her. She would speak sharply to the girl, call her lazy when she worked hardest, and praise her own son while ignoring the girl completely. For yes, the woman had a son of her own, a small, sharp-eyed boy who was doted upon endlessly. Now one day, the girl came into the house after gathering kindling from the wood. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her arms full of sticks. The stepmother met her at the door. "Where have you been so long, you idle creature?" she snapped. In the forest, mother, the girl said. I was gathering wood, as you asked. You lie. You've been wandering and dreaming, just like your good-for-nothing mother before you. The girl lowered her eyes. She knew better than to answer. Go into the kitchen, the woman hissed, and bring me an apple. Yes, mother, she whispered. And she went quietly into the kitchen, where a basket of bright red apples sat on the counter. She chose the largest one, the shiniest of them all, and brought it back. The stepmother took it in her hands. Her smile was thin and cold as frost. Come closer, child, she said. The girl stepped forward. The woman held out the apple. Take a bite, my dear, she said sweetly. You must be hungry. The girl looked at her strangely. This was not the woman she knew. Still, she reached out, took the apple, and lifted it to her lips. And the very moment her teeth touched the skin to crack, the woman struck. With a cruel twist, she pushed the girl back and raised her knife, the one meant for chopping bread. The apple tumbled to the floor. And so, the girl's sweet, innocent, gentle was gone. Just like that, the house was silent. The stepmother, with heart as black as night, dragged the girl's body away, out behind the house to where a rose tree grew in the garden. It was a slender tree bare limbed from winter, its roots sunken deep in the cold earth. There, beneath the sleeping rose tree, she buried the child. No one saw, no one heard. Not even the birds in the hedgerow dared to sing that day. And later, when the man returned from market, he looked around. Where is my daughter? He asked. The woman, calm and stern, replied. She went to visit her aunt in the next village. She left with a basket of cakes and apples. She won't be back for some time. The man nodded slowly. He was a quiet man, and he believed too much, too easily. So the days passed. But the woman's son, the little boy with sharp eyes and quick feet, he knew something was wrong. His sister had not said goodbye. She had not packed her things. And most of all, the rose tree outside his window. It had begun to bloom. In the dead of winter. No other tree in the village had bud or blossom, but this rose tree, once barren, and now bore a single white flower, soft as silk, pale as moonlight, and it gave off a sweet perfume that filled the garden and the house with sorrow. The boy would often sit beneath it. He would rest his hand on its trunk, and he would cry. He missed her, more than words. And one night, as he sat beneath the blooming tree, a wind rose in the dark. The branches swayed. Petals drifted down. And then he heard it. A soft rustling. A voice. Her voice. Sorrow not, little brother, sorrow not. He sat up straight. The tree shimmered. Petals danced like stars in the breeze. Was he dreaming? Or had she come back? The moon was high in the sky, casting silver light across the garden, and the rose tree shimmered in the glow, its single white blossom now fully open. The little boy sat beneath it, his arms curled around his knees, his cheek pressed against the cool bark. And again the breeze whispered through the leaves. And again he heard her voice. Faint and far away, yet clear as bells in the morning air. Sorrow not, little brother, sorrow not. He looked up. The petals were falling gently like snow. Then, through the branches, he saw it. A white bird, beautiful and strange. Its feathers glowed like pearl, its eyes were gentle, sad, and in its beak it held a golden chain. The bird flew down, slow and graceful, and perched on the very edge of the rose tree. And then it sang. a song unlike any he had heard. It was not a song of this world, but something older, deeper. It sang of a girl in a little house, kind and true. It sang of a wicked woman who fed her lies and handed her an apple. It sang of a cruel blade and a buried body beneath a tree, and a brother who wept. Tears streamed down the boy's face. He knew. The rose tree had not bloomed for beauty, it had bloomed for sorrow, for memory, for truth. And the bird, it was her spirit, her voice, her heart still singing. He stood up slowly. The bird fluttered from the branch and circled above him once, twice, 3 times, and then it flew up into the sky, white against the stars, and off into the night, but not away forever. Oh no. The very next morning the bird returned, and this time it flew to the goldsmith's house in the village. It sang its strange and beautiful song. The goldsmith listened, enchanted, and said, "For such a song I will give you this," and he handed over a fine gold chain. The bird took it in its beak and flew again. Then it came to the shoemaker. It sang, and the shoemaker, trembling, gave up a pair of red shoes trimmed with ribbons and silver lace. Then the bird went to the mill, and its song turned dark, fierce, full of truth, and the miller, hearing it, gave the bird a heavy stone, cold and hard. The bird took the stone in its claws, the chain in its beak, and the shoes in a tiny sack upon its back, and it flew home, back to the rose tree, back to the boy. There it dropped the chain around the boy's neck, a gift, a promise. It set the red shoes at his feet. The boy wept with joy. But then the bird flew through the open window of the house, where the stepmother sat at the table, peeling apples. She looked up just as the bird dropped the stone. The stone struck her, and she fell. Just like that. The boy rushed in. The house was silent again. The bird sang once more, a soft and peaceful lullaby. Then it circled the rose tree one final time, its wings glowing in the morning light. And it vanished as if it had never been. But the rose tree still stands in that quiet garden, taller than before. And sometimes, on nights when the stars are especially bright, a single white feather will drift down and land on the windowsill. And if you listen closely through the hush of midnight, you might still hear her singing. The old woman and her pig. Once upon a quiet morning, just as the stars were fading and the sun was brushing golden light across the meadows, an old woman stepped out of her cozy cottage with a warm basket under her arm and a mission in her mind. She lived alone, but she was not lonely. Her days were filled with simple things, tending her little garden, sweeping the hearth, knitting by the window while watching clouds float by like old friends. But this morning was different. Today she was going to market, not for onions, not for thread, but for something special, a pig. Yes, a pig. A fine, round pink pig. She had saved her pennies in a tin box hidden behind her cupboard. She counted them one by one the night before, by candlelight. And this morning she took them into her pocket and tied her shawl tight. With her sturdy boots clomping gently along the path, she hummed an old tune, a lullaby, maybe the kind only grandmothers remember. Birds chirped softly. The grass was still dew beneath her feet, and the breeze, warm and sleepy, whispered through the hedgerows. Soon she reached the village market, alive with color and chatter. Vendors called out their wares of fresh eggs, turnips and taters, ribbons from the city, but she walked with purpose, straight past the jellies and the buttons and the bundles of lavender to the livestock stalls near the far gate. And there, in a wooden pen with straw scattered about, she saw him. A piglet, round as a bun, pink as a petal, with curious eyes and a nose that twitched like it had secrets to tell. "Oh yes," she smiled, "that's the one." She handed over her coins, looped the soft string around the piglet's belly, and the two of them trotted away, an old woman and her pig. The piglet snuffled along beside her, sometimes darting toward a butterfly, sometimes pausing to sniff a daisy. The old woman chuckled and tugged the string gently. "None of that now," she said. "We've a journey to finish." The path home wound through green fields, then past whispering trees. It was warm now, the kind of warm that makes your eyelids heavy and your thoughts slow. Eventually, they came to a stile of a wooden step that crossed between two meadows. It wasn't tall, just a single step over a fence line. The old woman climbed up, turned around, and held out her hand. "Come along, piggy, over you go." But the pig stopped, planted its little hooves in the grass, and sat right there, no budging, not a step, not a wiggle. The old woman tugged. She clucked her tongue. She pleaded. She even offered him the last crust of her bread. But the pig just blinked up at her as if to say, "No thank you. I like it right here." "The well now," the woman said, brushing dust off her apron. "That simply won't do." And with a determined nod, she left the pig by the stile, safe in the grass, and went looking for help. Not far down the path, she came upon a dog, a big, shaggy thing lying in the sun, tail flicking at flies, eyes half closed. "Dog," said the woman, "dog, come bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." The dog yawned, stretched, and blinked up at her. "I won't bite the pig," it said. "Not for you, not for anyone." "Well then," the old woman sniffed, "I'll find something that'll make you do it." And off she went again. A little further on, beneath an oak tree, she found a long stick. "Stick," she said, "beat the dog. Dog won't bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the stick just lay still. "I won't beat the dog," it said, dry and splintery. "HMPH," she muttered. "Then I'll find something that'll make you do it." And off she went again, shawl flapping, boots crunching, grumbling just a little under her breath. Soon, she came upon a cottage where smoke curled gently from the chimney. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, warming the stones and singing its little fire song. "Fire," she said, "burn the stick. Stick won't beat the dog. Dog won't bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the fire flickered low and replied with a soft hiss, "I won't burn the stick." "Well then," the old woman said with growing resolve, "I'll ask the water to quench you." And so she walked once more, past sleepy hedges, past fluttering butterflies, all the way to a babbling brook where water danced over stones like laughter. "Water," she said, kneeling beside it, "quench the fire. Fire won't burn the stick. Stick won't beat the dog. Dog won't bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the water only chuckled over its pebbles and answered, "I won't quench the fire." The old woman sat back on her heels, eyes blinking up at the sky. "Well then," she sighed, "I suppose I'll need to ask the ox to drink the water." So off she went once again, the old woman, with her shawl wrapped tight, walking under skies just beginning to blush with the golden hints of sunset. Her boots tapped on the dusty path, and she hummed to herself softly, not out of cheer, but to keep the rhythm going, step by step. At the edge of the next pasture she came upon an ox of bacon brown, with sleepy eyes and horns that curled like old branches. He was munching slowly on some grass, chewing in that thoughtful way that oxen do. "Ox," said the woman kindly but firmly, "drink the water. Water won't quench the fire. Fire won't burn the stick. Stick won't beat the dog. Dog won't bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the ox looked at her, blinked twice, and said in a slow, gravelly voice, "I won't drink the water. Then I'll find something," she said with a puff of determination, "that'll make you drink." She turned around, and with the shadows growing longer, walked on farther down the road. Just past the old mill, she found a butcher sharpening his knives, humming a tune that rose and fell like the whistle of wind through leaves. "Butcher," she said, "kill the ox. Ox won't drink the water. Water won't quench the fire. Fire won't burn the stick. Stick won't beat the dog. Dog won't bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." The butcher looked up, wiped his hands on his apron, and said, "I will kill the ox, though well." She huffed, not unkindly, "Then I'll find someone who will make you." She pressed on, past the mill, through a grove where the trees whispered secrets to the evening air. And there, just as the moon peeked up over the treetops, she came upon a rope maker, spinning his twine and tying knots like puzzle pieces. "Rope," she said, "hang the butcher. Butcher won't kill the ox. Ox won't drink the water. Water won't quench the fire. Fire won't burn the stick. Stick won't beat the dog. Dog won't bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the rope gave a little shiver and whispered, "I won't hang the butcher." And so, weary now but not beaten, the old woman made her way farther still until she came upon a mouse, sitting quite politely on a stone, washing its whiskers in the twilight. "Mouse," she said, crouching down close, "gnaw the rope. Rope won't hang the butcher. Butcher won't kill the ox. Ox won't drink the water. Water won't quench the fire. Fire won't burn the stick. Stick won't beat the dog. Dog won't bite the pig. Pig won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." The little mouse paused. Its tiny ears twitched. Then it said in the softest, squeakiest voice you can imagine, "I will." And off it scurried, quick as a blink. The mouse went and gnawed the rope. The rope, free of its knot, then hung the butcher. The butcher, so startled, killed the ox. The ox, before he fell, drank the water. The water, loosed and ready, quenched the fire. The fire at last burned the stick. The stick, alive with sparks, beat the dog. The dog, yelping, bit the pig. And the pig, oh, that pig with a squeal and a bounce, finally jumped over the stile. The old woman clapped her hands in delight. "Well now," she chuckled, "that's that." She scooped up the pig, tied her shawl once more, and the two of them, woman and pig, ambled back along the moonlit path, back through meadows, beneath a sky full of stars. And when they reached the little cottage, she opened the creaky door, lit the lamp, and set a pot of tea to warm on the hearth. The pig curled up beside the fire, snout tucked under its belly, dreaming piggy dreams. And the old woman? She sipped her tea, rocked gently in her chair, and finally went to bed. And she did get home that night, safe and sound, with her pig. And so may you. How Jack went to seek his fortune once upon a time, in a quiet little corner of the world, where cottages were thatched with golden straw and fields rippled like green oceans beneath the breeze, there lived a boy named Jack. Jack was a bright, thoughtful lad, with shaggy brown hair, bare feet, and big dreams. He wasn't rich, not in coins, anyway, but in heart, hope. and imagination, Jack was wealthy beyond measure. He lived with his mother in a crooked little cottage with ivy lining its walls and a crooked chimney that always leaned just slightly to the east. Their days were simple. They kept a garden, tended chickens, and made do with very little. But lately even the little they had was beginning to fade. One morning, Jack sat at their wooden table, his elbows resting on the worn surface, and stared at the last heel of bread on the plate. The cupboard was empty. The fire was low. He looked to his mother, her hands folded, her face soft with quiet worry. "Mother," Jack said gently, "the bread is nearly gone, and I saw only one egg in the coop this morning." His mother nodded slowly. She had known this moment was coming. "My dear Jack," she said, brushing a strand of grey from her cheek, "you've grown strong and wise. You have the heart of your father and the soul of an adventurer. It's time, I think time for you to go into the world and seek your fortune." Jack felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of fear and excitement. He had dreamed of distant lands, of cities made of glass and forests filled with singing birds, and now that dream was beginning. His mother packed him a small satchel with a few crusts of bread, a slice of cheese, and a warm kiss for the road. She tied his cloak snug around his shoulders, and as he stepped out the door, the morning sun spilled across the fields, painting the world in gold. Jack took his first steps down the winding lane, past the stone well, past the old mill that hadn't turned in years, and out into the open world. The air smelled of springtime and new leaves, soft rain, and the promise of something more. It wasn't long before Jack met his first companion. Just at the bend of the road, sitting atop a mossy fence post, was a grey cat. She was sleek and slender, with fur like smoke and eyes like emerald fire. "Where are you bound, young Jack?" she purred, stretching lazily. "To seek my fortune," Jack said proudly. "A noble quest," said the cat. "I have grown tired of chasing mice and sleeping in hay-lofts. I long for adventure. May I join you?" Jack smiled. "Of course you may." And so they walked on the boy and cat through the gentle morning light. Soon after, they came upon the dog, an old, loyal creature with shaggy ears and a kind gaze. He lay beneath a tree, his head resting on his paws, watching the clouds drift above. "Where are you two going?" asked the dog, his tail wagging softly. "To find our fortunes," Jack replied. "Ah," said the dog. "I've guarded farmyards and chased foxes all my life, but I've never seen the world. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to come along." Jack gave him a scratch behind the ears. "Welcome to the journey." With three now walking the road, their laughter echoed through the hills. The sun climbed higher, and by midday, they came across a small meadow where a goat grazed near a stone wall. She looked up with a bleat and asked, "Where might you be headed with such happy steps? To seek our fortunes," the group chimed. "Well then," said the goat with a nod, "I can clear thorny paths, provide warm milk, and I've grown tired of these same fields. Might I join you?" Jack chuckled. "Of course. The more, the merrier." And so Jack, the cat, the dog, and the goat continued on. They passed under wide oak trees, where birds sang lullabies to the wind. They crossed a stream on stepping stones, laughing when the dog splashed and the cat hissed at her wet paws. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the path, they found an old barn at the edge of a field. Its door creaked softly as Jack pushed it open. Inside was a warm pile of hay, a beam for the cat, a cozy corner for the dog, and soft straw for the goat. Jack built a small fire with twigs and dry grass, and as the stars came out one by one, they shared stories of what their fortunes might look like. "A fish every day and the windowsill in the sun," purred the cat, "a place to run, children to protect." woofed the dog. Endless clover and a patch of shade, bleated the goat. And Jack, he looked up at the stars and whispered, I just want to make my mother proud and see what wonders the world might hold. The next morning, Jack woke to the golden glow of sunlight filtering through the cracks in the barn wall. The cat stretched and yawned, curling her tail around her paws. The dog rolled over, paws touching in his sleep, chasing dreams. The goat bleated softly, already nibbling at a bit of straw. Jack sat up and smiled. A new day was here, and the journey would continue. They ate the last bits of bread and cheese Jack had brought, shared between them all with laughter and good cheer, then stepped once more onto the open road. As they walked, they passed through deeper woods. The sun flickered through the leaves above, and the path grew narrow and winding. Suddenly, they heard a sound, a rustle, a snap, and then a low growl. From behind a tree stepped a wolf, lean, grey, and sharp-eyed. Jack stepped forward, heart pounding but brave. Good Sir Wolf, he said, keeping his voice steady, we mean no harm. We're only travelers seeking our fortunes. The wolf licked his lips, eyeing the goat. I see, he said, voice like cracked bark. And what fortune lies in a plump little goat and a tasty dog? The goat snorted, stepping behind Jack. The dog growled low. The cat arched her back, fur bristling, but Jack held out his hand. We have nothing to fight with, he said, but we do have stories and songs and the warmth of fire. If you are hungry, we'll share what we have, even if it's not much. The wolf blinked. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had offered kindness, only fear. After a long silence, he sat down. You're a strange group, he muttered, but I'm tired of being feared. Tired of lonely nights and empty bellas. Jack smiled. Then come with us, he said. Every journey needs a strong heart, and yours might just surprise us all. So the wolf joined the travelers. Now there were 5. They wandered through villages and valleys, over gentle hills and quiet streams. Sometimes they found shelter in old mills, sometimes under starless skies, and along the way they sang songs, shared dreams, and grew closer as friends. One afternoon they came upon a cottage, small, crumbling, with a broken fence and shuttered windows. Out front sat an old man on a stool, his eyes dull and shoulders slumped. Good day, sir, Jack said, stepping forward. The old man looked up. You've come to rob me, I suppose. Jack blinked. No, sir, we're only travelers, looking for honest work and maybe a warm meal. The man sighed. Well, I have nothing but this broken house, a barren garden, and an empty hearth. I once had a family, but they've gone, and I'm too old now to tend to this place alone. Jack turned to his friends. Then he said gently, would you let us stay a while? We'll fix your roof, plant your garden, and light your fire. All we ask in return is a place to rest, and perhaps a story. The old man looked at Jack for a long moment. Then he nodded, and so they stayed. The dog fetched sticks and barked joyfully. The goat cleared the weeds and nibbled new shoots. The cat chased mice from the corners. The wolf gathered stones and timber with quiet strength. And Jack repaired the roof, patched the windows, and rebuilt the garden fence. Together, they brought life back to the old house. By the end of the week, the fire crackled in the hearth, the garden bloomed with color, and the old man, he smiled again. He told them stories each night of days long gone, of lost love, and of fortunes once found. On their final evening, the old man pulled Jack aside. You came here with nothing but kindness, he said, and you gave me back hope. He handed Jack a small pouch. Inside were 4 silver coins. Take this, he whispered. It's not much, but it's what I have, and in your hands it might just grow into something greater. Jack nodded, deeply touched. The next morning, the 5 friends, boy, cat, dog, goat, and wolf, set off once more. But now, Jack had found something far greater than a fortune. He had found friendship. He had brought joy. He had made a difference. And somewhere in the sky above, the stars that would guide him home were already shining in the daylight, just waiting for him to look up. And that is how Jack went to seek his fortune and found something even better along the way. Mr. Vinegar, once upon a time, in a little wood at the edge of a deep green forest, there lived a man named Mr. Vinegar, and his dear wife, Mrs. Vinegar. They weren't wealthy, nor did they have much to call their own, but they had a cozy cottage made from the hollow trunk of a grand old oak tree. And in that quiet little wooden home, they lived simply, and they lived kindly. But one day, as the sun filtered softly through the leafy branches above, Mr. Vinegar and his wife sat together at the small wooden table and sighed a long, weary sigh. "Oh, Mr. Vinegar," said his wife with a shake of her head, "life would be so much easier if we only had a little money. We could buy flour, or apples, or maybe even a cow." Mr. Vinegar nodded solemnly. "Indeed, my dear," he said, "but all we have is that old cowhide hanging on the wall." Now, it wasn't much to look at a worn-out old cowhide, stiff and dusty, with patches and tears from many winters past, but it was all they had that might fetch a coin or two. So the next morning, bright and early, Mr. Vinegar rolled up the cowhide beneath his arm, put on his patched-up hat, and set off through the woods toward the market. The path was soft beneath his feet, covered in pine needles and moss, and the air smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke. "Perhaps today will bring us good fortune," he whispered to himself. And sure enough, when he arrived at the market square, a jolly man with a wide grin approached him. "Well now, what have we here?" said the man, eyeing the cowhide. "A fine piece of leather, good sir," said Mr. Vinegar. "Sturdy and strong, I am looking to trade." The man nodded thoughtfully, then reached into his coat and pulled out a shiny gold coin. "I'll give you this," he said. "One full gold piece. What do you say?" Mr. Vinegar's eyes went wide. He'd never held so much money in all his life. Without a second thought, he handed over the cowhide and pocketed the coin. He whistled all the way down the lane, his heart light with excitement. But soon he began to think. "A gold coin is a fine thing," he murmured, "but I can't eat it, and I can't wear it, and I certainly can't milk it." Just then he spotted a man leading a cow down the road. "Ah," thought Mr. Vinegar. "A cow, just what Mrs. Vinegar wished for." He called out, "Good day to you, sir. Would you trade your cow for this fine gold coin?" The man looked the coin over, nodded, and soon Mr. Vinegar found himself proudly leading the cow along the dusty road. "I've done well today," he said with a grin. "Mrs. Vinegar will be so pleased." But the sun climbed higher, and the day grew hot, and soon the cow began to lag behind. "She must be thirsty," Mr. Vinegar thought. Just then, he saw a woman sitting by a well, playing a sweet little tune on a bagpipe. The cow lowed softly, and Mr. Vinegar paused. "That's a fine sound," he said. "Oh yes," said the woman, "I play it every day. It keeps me cheerful. Would you trade it?" asked Mr. Vinegar. She raised her eyebrows. "For what?" "The wool for this cow," he said hopefully. The woman thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well." And just like that, Mr. Vinegar handed over the cow and took up the bagpipes. He gave them a try, squeezing and puffing squee. Honk! It sounded dreadful, but he was determined to learn. He puffed again, squonk, and again wheeze. He winced and scratched his head. Just then, a man walked by carrying a beautiful, thick woven coat. "My word," said the man, covering his ears. "That's a terrible scent." Mr. Vinegar chuckled awkwardly. "Perhaps you'd like to trade," said the man, "this fine coat for those dreadful pipes." Mr. Vinegar hesitated, but the coat was warm and handsome. "A deal," he said, and so he wrapped the coat around himself, feeling rather pleased. He had no bagpipes, no cap, no gold coin, but he had a fine coat to show his wife. Now, with the warm coat snug around his shoulders, Mr. Vinegar wandered on, feeling rather fine. The path led him through fields of clover, past sleepy sheep and quiet streams. And though he had no gold, and no cow, and no bagpipes, he still smiled to himself. "Mrs. Vinegar will like this coat," he said aloud, patting the fabric proudly. But as he walked, the sun grew hotter and the coat heavier. "Oof," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. It wasn't long before he came upon a man sharpening a long, fine piece of glass. It sparkled in the sunlight like a shard of starlight. "What have you there?" asked Mr. Vinegar. "A looking glass," the man replied. "You can see your own face in it." Mr. Vinegar blinked. "Really? That's a wonder. Would you trade it for this thick coat?" The man laughed. "In the seat, gladly." And so Mr. Vinegar took the looking glass in both hands, watching his reflection wobble as he turned it left and right. "Well, I'll be," he chuckled. "That's my very own nose." He held the glass carefully, admiring himself, but not watching where he walked. Suddenly his toe caught on a root. He stumbled at the glass slit, and with a sharp crack, it shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces on the road. "Oh no," whispered Mr. Vinegar. He looked around. No one to trade with now. No coin. No cow. No coat. No looking glass. Just the same old empty hands. And worse still, he was nearly home. "What will I tell Mrs. Vinegar?" he whispered. He trudged the last mile back, his shoulders slumped, his heart heavy. At last, he reached their little wooden house. The birds chirped in the trees. The smoke curled from the chimney. And there she was, Mrs. Vinegar, sitting on the stump by the door, peeling potatoes. She looked up, smiled, and then her smile faded. "Back so soon?" she asked gently. Mr. Vinegar nodded. "Well, did you sell the cow?" "I did," he said. "And what did you get?" He looked down. Then slowly he told her everything. The coin, the cow, the bagpipes, the coat, the looking glass, and the fall that shattered it all. Mrs. Vinegar stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. And then she laughed. "Oh, Mr. Vinegar," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "You silly man." He blinked. "You're not angry?" "No," she said with a small smile. "I was hoping for flour, or apples, or a cow. But what I really wanted," she said, taking his hand, "was to see you come home safe." Mr. Vinegar's face lit up. "And besides," she added with a wink, "next time I'll go to the market." And they both laughed together beneath the tall old oak as the last rays of the sun filtered through the leaves. And though they still had very little, no coin, no cow, no coat, they had each other. And somehow that was enough. The end. Nick's Not Nothing once upon a time, in a faraway land wrapped in green hills and golden light, there lived a king and a queen who longed for a child. They waited many years through winters and springs until, one quiet dawn, their wish was answered. A baby boy was born so sweet, so perfect that they could hardly believe their eyes. The queen, joyful beyond words, held him close and whispered, "You are everything our little Nick's not nothing." That was the name she gave him. Not a name out of a book, not a name from the court of family, but one that came straight from her heart. Nick's not nothing. Crescent moon now, soon after his birth, the king had to travel far from home. He packed food and wine, bade his queen farewell, and set out through forests and valleys, past snow-covered peaks, on royal business with another powerful king. But the journey was long, and as he traveled, he crossed a rickety bridge, a bridge guarded by a great, strange creature. It was no ordinary guard. A giant stood there, with a beard down to his boots, and eyes that glowed like coals. "Ho there, stranger," the giant bellowed. "No one crosses my bridge without a trade." The king, surprised but pressed for time, said, "I have no gold or silver on me, but I'll give you the first thing that comes out of my house when I return." The giant squinted, then grinned. Done, he growled and let the king pass. But the king, poor foolish king, he had forgotten something. The first thing that always came out of his house was none other than the queen herself, or now, perhaps, their baby boy. Crescent moon, when the king returned home weeks later, he was met with the sound of tiny laughter. The queen was standing at the door, cradling their son in her arms, just stepping out to greet him. The moment his boot hit the path, he remembered his promise. The king's face turned pale. The queen, seeing his sudden sorrow, asked, "What's the matter, my love?" The king sat down beside her and told her everything. The journey, the giant, and the terrible promise he had made. She wept bitterly, rocking Nick's not nothing in her arms. But the queen would not surrender her son so easily. She ordered that Nix be hidden far, far away, sent to live in secret with a kind old gardener and his wife in a cottage deep in the forest. And so the child grew quiet and bright with the flowers and birds for company. The giant waited. Years passed. But giants are patient and promises are never truly forgotten. The forest where Nix not nothing lived was quiet and green, and the boy grew up with the wind in his hair and moss beneath his feet. The old gardener and his wife treated him like their own, and though he didn't know the truth of his birth, he always felt a tug in his heart as if something far away was calling him home. The days were soft, the nights were gentle, but deep in the hills the giant remembered. And one cloudy morning, with mist rolling over the trees like a slow grey tide, the giant came back. He stomped down the road toward the king's castle, his boots cracking stones beneath him, his beard trailing like smoke. "Time's up," the giant growled, his voice shaking the windows of the royal hall. "You promised me the first thing from your house, and I've come to collect." The king dropped to his knees, his crown slipping from his head. "I cannot give you my son," he pleaded. "He's only a boy." But giants care little for tears or regret. The giant roared, "Then you have broken your word, and the price must be paid." But the queen, oh, the clever queen, stepped forward, trembling. "Our son is missing," she said. "We do not know where he is. He was taken years ago." And in a way, it was true, for he had been hidden for his safety far from their reach. The giant narrowed his eyes. He knew a lie when he heard one, but he turned and stormed away, deciding he would find the boy himself. Crescent moon far off in the forest, next not nothing was gathering acorns when the sky grew strangely dark. A chill ran down his spine. The birds stopped singing. And then a boom, boom, boom. Heavy footsteps shook the trees. The giant had found him. Before Nix could run, the giant reached out one enormous hand and scooped him up like a pebble. "You're mine now," he rumbled. And just like that, nothing was taken. Crescent Moon the giant carried him back across rivers and hills, back over that same rickety bridge and into his great stone house nestled in the cliffs. Inside, the halls were cold, lit by firelight and shadow. There was no queen here, no gardener's wife, no warm bed or lullaby. Just hard stone, and 3 impossible tasks. Because you see, the giant didn't just want a boy, he wanted a servant. And the very next morning, he looked down at Nix and growled, "You'll work for me, boy. 3 things I'll have you do. If you fail even once, you'll never leave this place again." Nix stood as tall as he could, though his knees shook. "What must I do?" he asked. And the giant told him, first, he must clean out the giant's stable, which hadn't been touched in 100 years. Second, he must bring water from the well at the top of the glass hill, a hill no one had ever climbed. And third, he must bake bread for the entire castle using flour from a field that had no grain. Nix's heart sank. These tasks weren't just harder, they were impossible. But just as tears pricked his eyes, a soft rustling came from the corner of the room. And there, stepping into the firelight, was a girl. She had golden hair that shimmered like dawn and eyes that held 1,000 secrets. "I'll help you," she whispered when the giant had gone. "But only if you promise something in return." Nix nodded. "Anything." They then promised that if we ever escape this place, "You'll never forget me." "I promise," said Nix, not nothing. Crescent Moon, and that night, the girl, who was no ordinary girl, but the daughter of an enchantress, led him out to the stable. She waved her hand, and the dung and straw vanished in a twirl of sparkles. In the morning, when the giant came to check, he found the stable clean. His eyes narrowed. HMMPH. Tomorrow would be harder. When the giant saw the stable was spotless, he grunted through his thick beard. "One task done," he growled, "but he'll never complete the second." And he handed Nix nothing a bucket and pointed to the east. "There," he said, "atop the glass hill is the well that holds the water I drink. You'll bring it to me before sunset, or you'll never see another dawn." The hill shone under the morning sun, its surface slick like ice, sloping up and up until it kissed the clouds. Nix tried. He climbed. He slipped. He scraped his hands and knees. He fell back again and again. Tears welled in his eyes. But just as his heart began to break, the girl appeared again, her golden hair shimmering like moonlight. "I told you I'd help," she whispered. And from the folds of her cloak, she pulled out a small comb, a silver thread, and a single drop of dew on a silk leaf. She pressed the comb into his hand. "Place this in your hair," she said. "It will hold you steady on the hill." Then she tied the thread around his wrist. "It will guide your steps." Finally, she gave him the dew leaf. "When you reach the top, drop this into the well that will fill your bucket." Nix nodded, full of awe. He turned toward the hill once more, and this time he climbed. Slowly, carefully, step by step. The comb held him fast. The thread tugged him, gently, and when he reached the summit, he leaned over the well and dropped the dew. With a soft sound like a song, the well bubbled up, and his bucket filled with clear, shining water. Crescent Moon that evening, when the giant saw the full bucket, his eyes flared red. Twice you've tricked me, he thundered, but the third task will break you. He threw a sack of flour at Nix's feet. Bake me a feast of bread by sunrise, he roared, using only this from a field that has never grown a single grain. Nix stared at the empty sack. There was no flour, only dust and dream. The task was hopeless, until, of course, the girl returned. She touched the sack and whispered words older than time. The dust shimmered, turned golden, and rose into flour. Then she clapped her hands once and a great oven burst into life, its fire crackling warm and gentle. Together she and Nix kneaded the dough, shaped the loaves, and baked them one by one until the air was rich with scent and comfort. By morning, the table was filled with bread as soft, warm, perfect. When the giant returned, his rage turned to disbelief. 3 tasks and yet you live, he snarled. You'll not fool me again. But even giants cannot hold what is not truly theirs. Crescent moon that night, the girl came to Nix in the shadows. We must flee, she whispered. The giant will never stop trying to trap you now. We must escape, or he'll claim you forever. So they ran, out of the house, through the cliffs, over the rickety bridge, back into the deep green forest. But the giant woke, and oh, how he bellowed! He chased them through trees and thorns, his boots flattening hills, his breath hot as fire. But the girl had one last spell. From her cloak she dropped a comb. It grew into a thick forest behind them, branches twisting into a wall too dense for the giant to pass. Still he roared. Still he climbed. Then she dropped a flask of water, and a river burst from the earth, swallowing the path in a silver flood. Still the giant pressed on. Finally, she tossed a final thread of her silver ribbon, and a mountain rose up from the soil, sharp and jagged and tall as the clouds. The giant could not cross it. He pounded his fists and howled, and finally turned back. Nix and the girl were free. Crescent moon, but freedom, it seems, often asks a final price. For as they neared the edge of the kingdom, a strange mist curled around them. Nix felt sleepy, dizzy, his legs heavy as stone. He stumbled, and when he awoke he was alone, back in the king's court, surrounded by faces he did not know, and worst of all, he had forgotten her name, her voice, her golden hair, her magic, all lost. The king and queen rejoiced. Our son has returned, they cried. But Nix nothing wondered, the halls like a shadow, his heart aching with a hollow he could not name. Crescent moon, and then, one day, as the autumn leaves began to fall, a young girl came to the castle gates. Her eyes were like candlelight in the dark. Her cloak shimmered with moon thread, and when she spoke, she said only, I've come to find the one who made me a promise. No one knew her. No one remembered. Except Nix. He turned. He looked at her, and something inside his chest stirred. He took a step, then another, and then I promised I'd never forget you, he whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. And now you remember. He did. Nix nothing remembered at all. And the king and queen, for all their pride and sorrow, understood in that moment that love was stronger than any crown or curse. Crescent moon, so Nix and the girl, the enchantress's daughter, left the castle hand in hand. They returned to the quiet woods, where the sky was soft and the moss ran deep. And they lived not as rulers, nor prisoners, but as dreamers. Together, forever. And if you listen on a wind-whispered night, you just might hear the name next not nothing. Jack Canford. Once upon a time, in the quiet corner of the countryside, there lived a poor old soldier. His name was Jack Canford. Now, Jack had traveled far and wide, fought in battles, seen great cities, and walked dusty roads under both sun and moon. But in his old age, he had nothing but the coat on his back, a crooked walking stick, and the clever wit tucked beneath his weathered hat. One bright morning, with the sky blue as forget-me-nots, Jack set off along a winding country lane. He was whistling a tune and tapping his stick against the stones as he walked. He had no destination, only a heart full of mischief and a mind forever dreaming up clever plans. Before long, he came upon a quiet farm cottage. It sat nestled among hedgerows and dandelions, with smoke curling gently from the chimney and hens pecking lazily in the yard. Jack knocked at the door. Tap-a-tap-a-tap. A young woman entered. She had rosy cheeks and fur on her apron. She looked Jack up and down. "Yes, sir, what can I do for you?" Jack touched the brim of his hat and gave a low, sweeping bow. "Good day to you, my fine lady," he said. "I've come from beyond the hills and beyond them too. I've seen the world spin twice and come back again just to tell you some news." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Well, what sort of news?" Jack leaned close, his voice dropping to a mysterious whisper. "I bring word of your husband." The woman blinked in surprise. "My husband? But he only just went to the market in the village. He'll be back before supper." Jack shook his head solemnly. "Ah, but madam, you don't know what's happened." He was crossing the old bridge of the one near the mill, and just as he reached the middle, Jack paused dramatically. He tripped. The woman gasped. Jack held up one finger. "And when he stood up again, he wasn't your husband anymore." She stared at him. "Wasn't my husband? No indeed," said Jack. "He had been transformed," she repeated, mouth open. "Yes," cried Jack. "Transformed into a spirit, a ghost, a whisper of the man he once was. And he told me, before he vanished into the wind, that he had left something behind for you." The woman looked startled, half believing, half dreaming. "What did he leave?" she asked, her voice a hush. Jack straightened his back and gave her a wise, knowing look. "He left you a blessing, but it must be claimed at once. He said it was hidden here in this house, and it must be handed over by your own two hands to the one who carries his final message." Jack tapped his chest proudly. "And that dear lady is me." The woman blinked again. "A blessing?" she whispered. "Yes, madam, and to release his spirit and give him peace, you must fetch every coin in the house." She hesitated. I don't know." Jack placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Think of your poor husband, lost between this world and the next, waiting for your help." Tears welled in her eyes. "Oh, my poor William." She rushed inside, and Jack stood by the door humming softly to himself. Soon she returned, clutching a small leather pouch. She held it out. "All the money we have, take it, and give him peace." Jack took the pouch with a solemn nod. "I'll carry it to him," he said, "and he'll be free." And with that, he turned and walked away, his stick tapping, his boots scuffing the dust, his heart light with mischief. Jack Hannaford walked down the lane, the jingling pouch of coins in his coat, and the breeze tugging at the corners of his cloak. He chuckled to himself a low, wheezy laugh, like someone remembering an old joke. "That's one," he said under his breath. But the day was not done. Back at the cottage, the woman clutched her apron and peeked out the window. Worry danced across her face like shadows on a wall. Moments later, her husband came walking up the lane, carrying a sack of flour, a smile on his lips, and no sign of ghostly transformation. She ran to meet him. "William," she cried, "you're not a spirit." He looked puzzled. "Spirit? What are you talking about?" She pulled him inside and told him everything. Every single word. The bridge, the fall, the blessing, the money. And how the old soldier Jack Hannaford had said he was the messenger. William dropped the sack of flour. "Messenger? Why, that was no messenger, that was a trickster, a wandering rogue." He stomped out the door. His boots pounded the ground as he ran down the lane, anger rising like storm clouds over the hills. Not far ahead, Jack Hannaford was resting on a low stone wall, his legs crossed and the coin pouch jingling in his hand. When he saw the angry husband running toward him, he stood up slowly, very slowly, as if stretching after a nap. "Why, good day to you again," Jack called out. "Fine weather for running, is it, ye scoundrel?" William shouted. "You tricked my wife into giving you all our money." Jack placed a hand on his heart. "Tricked me, dear fellow? Your wife said you were in distress, transformed on the bridge, she said. You told her that?" William shouted, red in the face. "All but did I?" Jack smiled gently. "I only said I had a message. The story, my good man," she told herself. William opened his mouth, but Jack raised a hand. "No, now, no need for anger. Tell me what's lost. How many?" No, Jack said with a wink. "You still have your wife. She loves you dearly and feared for your soul." William paused. His face softened. Jack stepped forward and placed a single coin in his palm. "Here," he said. "A coin for a tale well told." Then he tipped his hat, twirled his stick, and marched off into the golden sunlight, whistling an old soldier's tune with not a care in the world. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, the farmer turned slowly homeward, still shaking his head. But perhaps, just perhaps, with a smile tucked in one corner of his mouth. And that is the tale of clever Jack Hannaford, a soldier with no fortune but his wit and a knack for making coins appear from thin air. Been very softly retold in dreamy voiceover pacing for sleepy listeners long, long ago. In a kingdom where rivers shimmered like silver threads under the moonlight, and green hills rolled on as far as sleepy eyes could dream, there lived two sisters in a great castle by the water's edge. The elder sister was tall and proud, with hair like burnished copper and eyes the color of winter frost. The younger sister was gentle and fair, her hair like spun gold and her smile warm as the morning sun. Though they were daughters of a powerful lord and shared the same blood and same home, the elder sister often watched her younger sibling with a silent envy. For the younger sister's beauty was known in all the neighboring lands, and her kindness had won the hearts of every servant, every bird, and every breeze that passed her way. Now, in those days, a young prince from a faraway kingdom came to visit their castle. He had heard tales of the lord's two daughters, but when he saw the younger sister for the first time, his heart was captured like a ship caught in a net. He brought her flowers from his travels, sang to her by the fountains, and rode with her across green fields under the bluest skies. And the elder sister, though she smiled and nodded, felt her heart turn colder and heavier with each passing day. The castle was quiet at night, but sometimes the elder would stand by the window watching the younger sister's candle flicker as she read or sewed, and in her heart a seed of jealousy grew. She began to whisper to herself, Why should she have all the joy, when I am the eldest, the heir, the first? One day, the sisters went walking by the river, the same peaceful river that sang lullabies to the sleeping trees. They were alone, just the two of them, beneath a soft, grey sky as gentle wind rippled the water's surface. The elder sister took her younger by the hand. They walked in silence, until they came to a lonely bend in the river where the trees leaned in close and the world seemed to hold its breath. And it was there with only the birds as witnesses that the elder sister turned, and with trembling hands pushed the younger into the cold, deep water. The river, startled, splashed high. The girl cried out once, but her voice was swallowed by the current. And then, silence. The elder sister stood frozen, her heart racing, the ripples fading. She turned and ran, leaving no trace but wet footprints on the grass. And the river? It carried the younger sister gently onward, her golden hair drifting like ribbons across the surface, until she was no more than a whisper beneath the willow trees. The river's secret and the singing harp the river wandered on. Past mossy banks and quiet woods, past sleepy villages and sleepy sheep, carrying with it the silent secret of a sister's sorrow and a love lost beneath the ripples. And one morning, far downstream where the reeds swayed like dancers, a poor miller came to the river's edge. He saw something strange caught in the roots of a tree that dipped low into the water, a strange shape, long and pale and tangled in golden hair. It was the body of a girl, still and silent, her hands folded like prayer, her lips parted as if mid-song. The miller called for help. They lifted her out with care and laid her down beneath the trees. The people mourned, for even in death she was beautiful, her face serene, as if dreaming of home, and no one knew who she was. Only that the river had carried her here and her story had no voice. Now near the place where she was found lived a poor harp maker. He was old and kind, and when he heard of the beautiful girl from the river, he came to see her. He looked at her long and sadly, and then, in a soft whisper, he said, "Let her spirit speak." He gently took a branch from the willow tree above her, and from the smooth white bone of her breastbone, he carved the frame of a harp. And from her golden hair, he made the strings thin and fine as sunlight caught on morning dew. When the harp was ready, he sat by the fire in his little cottage, and he plucked a single note. And oh, the harp sang. Not just music, but words. Mournful, sweet, and slow. It sang the story of a sister's jealousy, of love and laughter lost, of a river's sorrow and a secret carried far from home. Each time he played it, the harp wept with truth. It could only sing one song, the tale of the girl from the water and the sister who sent her there. Word of the magical harp spread quickly. Soon it reached the court of the lord, the very father of the two sisters. And the prince too heard of it. The same prince who once walked with the golden-haired girl through meadows and moonlit gardens. He sent for the harp, and when it arrived at the castle, the great hall fell silent as the harp maker placed it in the prince's arms. "Let it speak," he said, and the prince, with trembling fingers, struck the strings. The harp began to play itself. Soft at first, a whisper of wind and willow trees. Then it sang. She walked by the river, hand in hand with blood, but envy burned deeper than sisterhood could. She smiled through silence, then let me fall deep. I sang in the water, but no one heard me weep. The Binnery, oh Binnery, by the silver stream, I was lost to the river, to sorrow, to dream. The great hall grew still. The king stood pale. The elder sister turned white as snow. The harp continued. My love was near, my voice was gone. She pushed me down and I was gone. The bitter willow wept and the river told. and now I sing from wood and gold. The prince's hands dropped from the strings. His eyes burned with tears. The truth had been told. The harp fell silent. The elder sister fled the hall, her sobs echoing behind her. But no one followed. The last song of the harp, the great hall remained silent. Not a footstep, not a whisper, only the fading shimmer of music still echoing on the stone walls like a memory that could not be undone. The harp rested now, its golden strings still, its voice quiet, for it had spoken its truth. And the prince, his heart heavy, stood beside it. His gaze turned to the empty doorway where the elder sister had fled, but his heart did not follow her. Instead, he looked to the harp again. Clara, spirits still singing in its silence. The king rose from his chair. His face was pale, drawn with sorrow. He walked slowly to the harp, and with trembling fingers, he touched the carved frame of bone carved into beauty. She was mine, he whispered, his voice cracking like whole wood. My daughter, and I never knew her pain. The prince bowed his head. And she was my love, he said, gentle and kind, lost to seem. They stood there together, silent in their grief, while the court held its breath. Outside the tall windows, the sun was beginning to fold its light, turning the trees gold, its warmth touching the harp with a faint shimmer. The old harp maker stepped forward. He bowed low before the king. She was meant to sing, my lord, and now she has, let her rest. The king nodded. And so, in the garden of the castle, beneath a flowering tree, they laid the harp to rest. Not buried, but placed on a pedestal of polished stone. And around it bloomed forget-me-nots, willow trees wept into a pond, and lilies opened their quiet white mouths to the wind. And though the harp never played again, those who stood close in the evening breeze would sometimes swear they heard her song on the wind. By Binray I wandered, and Binray I cried, but love does not vanish even when it dies. By silver streams and river bends, my tale will softly stay, for love, once true, will find its way. Time passed. The prince never married. He would walk each morning to the harp's resting place and sit beneath the flowering tree. He'd close his eyes and imagine her hand in his again, light as petals, warm as dawn. And sometimes, when he dreamed, he would hear her laugh, feel her breath in the wind, and wake with the scent of lilies in the air. As for the elder sister, no one knows where she fled. Some say she wandered far into the northern woods, never to be seen again. Others whispered she lived alone in a tower, never singing, never smiling. But the harp remembered everything, and the people of the land never forgot the girl with golden hair and the river that once sang her name. Benore, sweet Benore. Her story passed from tongue to tongue, from mother to child, from harp string to dream. And it lives on still, beneath the stars, where rivers sing and willows weep and love even lost is never truly gone. Mouse and Massa once upon a time, in a quiet cottage at the edge of a mossy field, there lived an old woman who kept a small, grey mouse as her only company. She called him Mouse, and Mouse called her Mam. They got on well enough, simple days, warm evenings, and soft crumbs for supper. But there was another creature who crept along the garden walls at dusk. A sleek, whiskered cat with eyes like amber coins. The old woman called her Mouser. Mouser was not so friendly. She would sit beneath the window, tail flicking slowly, and stare at Mouse with thoughts she never shed. Well, one misty morning, the old woman stirred the porridge pot, humming softly to herself, when Mouse crept up to the hearth and asked, "Ma'am, may I have a little milk today? Just a drop." The old woman smiled and nodded. "Of course, little one, you've been kind and quiet and good, a drop you shall have." So she poured some milk in a shallow saucer, and Mouse lapped it gratefully near the fire. But Masu was watching. Later that evening, as the old woman dozed by the fire, Mouse slipped outside to enjoy the cool breeze. Master was waiting. She stepped up from behind the flour barrels and said with a silky voice, "Good evening, Mouse. I see you had milk today. That must have been nice." Mouse shivered. "Why, yes, Ma'am gave me some. She was kind." Mouse narrowed her eyes and took a slow step forward. "Oh yes, she is kind. But tell me, little Mouse, did you remember to thank her properly?" Mouse blinked. "I did," he said, nervously. "Twice, ahem," purred Mouser, circling him now. "Well then, that's very good. But next time, maybe you'll share a little with me, Wouldn't want to be selfish now, would we?" Mouse didn't know what to say. He nodded just to be polite and scurried back inside. That night, the wind whispered through the chimney, and Mouse had troubled dreams of feline eyes and curling claws in the dark. The next morning arrived with soft rain tapping on the window panes, and the scent of damp earth drifting through the cracks in the wooden door. The old woman yawned, rubbed her hands by the fire, and prepared a fresh pot of oat porridge. A gentle clink of pottery, a sigh from the chimney. Peace. Mouse, still feeling a bit uneasy from the night before, peeked out from his little hole behind the cupboard. He sniffed the air. Warm motes. And yes, milk again. He scurried over politely and waited. "Well, there you are," said the old woman kindly. "I saved you a little more milk. You seemed to enjoy it yesterday." Mouse squeaked gratefully. "Oh, thank you, ma'am, you're ever so good to me." But just as he leaned forward to sip, a voice slid through the open window like a cold breeze. "Well, well, didn't I say we'd share?" It was Mouser again. She was sitting on the sill, paws crossed neatly beneath her chest, tail coiled like a question mark. Her eyes sparkled, but not with kindness. The old woman turned her head. "Oh, there you are, Mouser. I've got a scrap of bacon for you in the pan." Mouser didn't blink. She stayed focused on Mouse. "Thank you, ma'am," she purred sweetly, but her whiskers twitched with something else. The old woman shuffled away, and in the hush that followed, Mouser spoke low. "I'm giving you a chance, Mouse, a simple one. Tomorrow you bring me your milk first, or I come and take it myself." Mouse trembled. "But it's all I get, just a few drops, and I need it." Mouse narrowed her eyes. "And I need you to understand something," she hissed softly. "This is not a suggestion, it's tradition. The strong eat first." She stretched, jumped down from the windowsill, and walked off into the garden, leaving a small scratch mark on the wood behind her. Mouse sat frozen, tail curled tight. The milk no longer tasted sweet. That night, the old woman hummed a lullaby as she rocked in her chair. Mouse tucked himself behind a basket, wide-eyed and worried. He didn't want to disobey Nam, and he didn't want to starve, but he really didn't want to meet Master in the dark again. So, quietly, before dawn, he tiptoed to the saucer of milk, dragged it near the window, and left it there. When the old woman woke and found the saucer dry, she frowned just a little. "H.M. I thought I gave Mouse a bit more than that," she murmured, but shrugged and poured a little again. Mouse said nothing. His ears drooped. His belly rumbled. But when Mouse returned that night, she left a single cherry pit at his hole. No words. Just the cherry pit. sign, a warning, or a deal. Night again. The fire in the hearth had burned down to glowing orange embers. The shadows danced gently across the wooden walls, and the old woman had long since gone to bed, her gentle snoring like a slow tide rolling in the quiet house. But Mas couldn't sleep. Not after what he'd seen earlier that day. Not after following Master just once through the garden path to the hollow look beneath the blackberry hedge. There, inside, tucked away under moss and thorns, was a pile of tiny bones. Bird bones. True bones. A ribbon from the old woman's sewing kit, and a little silver bell that still jingled softly. Mouse had scampered back to the cottage as fast as his pulse would carry him. His heart thumped loud in his chest. And now, under the weight of that knowledge, he sat curled in his corner, trembling. Then a knock. Not on the door, but at his hole. 3 soft taps. Tap, tap, tap. Mouse crept forward and peeped. Martha stood there, only her face lit by the moonlight through the shutters. No smile this time, only stillness. "It's your turn," she whispered. "I left you 3 nights, 3 gifts, 3 warnings." Mas gulped. "But I gave you the milk." "You did," she agreed. "But deals aren't made halfway, you see." "Mas, I don't want the milk, I want your place." She licked her paw delicately. "This warm home, this kindly old woman, you've had your season, I want mine." Mas stood a little taller. His whiskers twitched defiantly. "I won't leave, she loves me, I do no harm." Master's eyes gleamed. "She loves comfort, and I am comfort too. I purr, I warm her lap, and unlike you, I don't nibble through the flour sack when I'm nervous." Mas blushed, though his fur covered it. But then he remembered. The cupboard. The secret panel beneath the floor. He ran. With a flash of whiskers and a twitch of tail, Mas darted to the wall, slipped behind the basket, and lifted the small plank he'd found weeks ago. Inside seeds. Dried berries. A drop of honey. And a piece of ribbon from the woman's apron. But more than that, the parchment. A forgotten recipe. A charm. The old woman had tucked it away in her younger days when she dabbled in odd little brews for weary bones and sleepless nights. Mouse had seen her murmur to it now and then when her knees ached. And now he had an idea. Morning came early. The old woman stretched, yawned, and blinked at the sunlight. Her tea was already warm on the fire, her porridge perfectly stirred, and a curious smell wafted from the cupboard. "And now what on earth is?" she murmured. And there, next to her teacup, sat Mouse, with a bundle of herbs, a dried thistle, and the parchment. He pointed his tiny paw. The old woman squinted. Then her eyes widened, and slowly, slowly she smiled. That night Masa returned, graceful, calm, paws like whispers on the floorboards. But the moment she stepped through the door she paused. A scent, not fear, not milk, but something else. Old magic. Mas stood by the hearth. Behind him, a tiny charm drawn on the stones in chalk. The old woman sat in her rocker, silent, watching. "Master," she said softly, "you've been a clever girl, but cleverness is only good when it's kind." She lifted her hand, and in it a bell, the silver bell from Master's hollow log. It jingled once, bright, clear, final. Mother hissed, arched her back and vanished, gone in a puff of black mist and moon dust. The bell fell silent. From that day on, Mouse lived in peace. The old woman gave him more than milk. He got bits of oatcake, crumbs of cheese, and best of all, stories by Violet. He listened as she read aloud, her voice soft and warm as the shadows curled up to sleep. And whenever the wind howled at night, or a branch scraped the shutters, Mouse would smile, because he knew some things don't come back once they're truly gone. And some homes are worth protecting with courage, no matter how small you are. Sleepy rushes. Once upon a time, in a fine old house by the marshlands, there lived a wealthy gentleman and his 3 daughters. The man was private and particular, and he loved his daughters dearly, but he needed, oh yes, he needed to be told just how much they loved him in return. One morning, as the dawn mist curled over the fields, he turned to his girls and said in a thoughtful tone, "Daughters, tell me truly, how much do you love your old father?" The eldest daughter smiled and declared with a flourish, "Father, I love you as much as the richest gold." The second daughter gave him a gracious spur and said, "And I love you as much as the finest jewels from the Queen's own crown." The man nodded proudly, his chest puffed with joy. Then he turned to the youngest. She was quiet, with thoughtful eyes and a gentle spirit, and when she spoke, her voice was soft as falling snow. "Father," she said, "I love you as fresh meat loves salt." There was a pause. The gentleman blinked. His smile vanished. "As meat loves salt," he echoed, his voice growing sharp. The youngest nodded. "Yes, Father, salt brings out the goodness in all things." But the man did not understand. He took her words as a slight insult to a rejection of the love he so dearly wanted. His face darkened, and with a heavy heart twisted by pride, he pointed toward the door. "Then go," he said. "Go from this house and take nothing with you." Her sisters gasped, but the youngest said not a word. She lowered her eyes, bowed deeply, and left. Barefoot and cloaked in sorrow, she wandered into the marshes. There she gathered rushes tall and whispering, green with silver tips. She wove them carefully into a cloak with a hood, until she was unrecognizable, and from that day on, she was known not by her name, but as Capo Rushes. And so Capo Rushes, wrapped in her cloak of reeds and whispers, wandered until she found a large, fine house at the edge of a wide, shining river. It was grand with tall chimneys, bright windows, and warm lights dancing inside. She stood quietly by the door, watching shadows pass within. At last, the housekeeper came out, a stout woman with tired eyes and a generous spirit. "What are you wanting, child?" she asked kindly. Capo Rushes lowered her head and said in the softest voice, "A place to work, if you please. I ask for no more than a warm hearth and bread crusts." The housekeeper looked her over. Barefoot, muttered, cloaked in rushes. "Well, we need someone for the scullery," she said. "It's hard work, you'll wash and scrub, and no complaints." Capo Rushes nodded once, and so her life in the big house began. Waxing crescent moon, she worked in silence. Day by day, she scrubbed floors till they gleamed, peeled vegetables till her fingers ached, and washed pots and pans until she could see her reflection in their shine. But never did she remove her cloak. No one knew who she truly was, a fine lady born, now hidden beneath humble reeds. And yet, there was something graceful about the way she moved, the way her eyes sparkled even when soot lined her cheeks. Soon, whispers began to float through the grand halls. Who is the girl in the rushes? Dizzy now in this fine house. There lived the master's son, a young man with clever eyes and a kind smile. One day, as Capo Rushes stood by the kitchen door, he passed by, then paused. He said nothing, only looked curious, thoughtful. Then, with a gentle nod, he walked on. From that day forward, he noticed her more often. At the well, in the garden, in the early dawn light as she fed the chickens hidden under her rushes. But she always looked away, always stayed silent. Cloud one week, there came a grand announcement. The family would hold 3 great dances, each finer than the last. Everyone would attend. Everyone except the scullery girl. She was to remain in the kitchens, watching the dancing candles flicker against the walls from far away. But Capo Rushes, she had secrets yet to show. For under her cloak, hidden in a dusty chest she'd brought from her past life, were 3 gowns finer than moonlight. Gowns no one had seen, not even the housekeeper. One for each night of dancing. Sparkles on the first night of the dance, after the house was quiet, Capo Rushes unwrapped her cloak. She bathed in the moonlight, brushed the rushes from her hair, and slipped into a dress as soft and blue as the midnight sky. Her hair shone like starlight, and she walked barefoot still to the ballroom. All turned when she entered. The master's son stared, and before the night was done, he had danced only with her. He asked her name. She only smiled. And before midnight she was gone, vanished into the shadows like a breeze through reeds. Waxing crescent moon the next night, she wore a gown of deep, gleaming silver like frost on the lake. Again she danced with him. Again she left without a word. Full waning last, on the 3rd night she wore a gown as gold as the rising sun. And once again they danced. And once again she slipped away, but not before he took her hand and said softly, "If you are real, then leave me a token." She did not answer, but as she turned away, she let fall one slender ring glimmering on the floor. She vanished before he could follow. Ring, the master's son picked up the ring and knew. She was the one. The next day, the master's son woke with only one thought: the girl in the golden gown. The girl who danced as if the stars themselves had taught her. The girl who said nothing and yet left behind a ring that now sat glowing in his palm. He told his father, "I will not eat, nor sleep until I find her." They sent word far and wide, but no one knew her name. No one had seen her face. And so, the young man fell ill, quiet, pale. He would touch the ring and whisper, "If only I knew who she was." Dizzy below stairs, Capo Rushes worked as she always did, washing, scrubbing, silent as snowfall. But the housekeeper noticed that her eyes watched the young man whenever he passed. And one day, quietly, she asked, "Why don't you go to him, child?" Capo Rushes said nothing. She only clutched the hidden rings twin in the folds of her cloak and waited. Thud now the young man's illness deepened. His father, in worry, prepared a feast. "Make it grand," he said to the cooks. "Bring the finest meats and wines, surely food will revive him." And in the kitchens, Capo Rushes stepped forward and said, "Let me make the broth." The cook raised a brow. "You?" But she insisted, so they let her. And in that quiet kitchen, she made a bowl of soup with all the care in her heart. And when she added salt, she did not hold back. Water wave upstairs, the young man sipped the soup, and his eyes widened. He sat upright for the first time in days. He called to his father and said, "That was the best thing I've tasted. I feel as if I remember something, something I forgot. And he sent for the one who made it. Capo rushes came cloak and all. She bowed low, and he looked at her, heart pounding. "Where did you make this?" he asked. She nodded once. Then slowly she reached into her cloak and held out the second ring, the match to the one he kept by his heart. "We ring, and just like that, he knew. She is the one," he whispered, and Capo rushes for the first time smiled. Blossom, there was joy, there was laughter, and there was a wedding. But Capo Rushes had one last thing to do before she married the man she loved. She sent a quiet invitation to the home she had once fled, to the father who had cast her out. Sparkles, and he came, not knowing who had sent for him. At the wedding feast, he sat at the long table among music and candles, and food as fine as any king's. But as he tasted each dish, he frowned. "This food," he said softly, "has no flavor. The meat's tender, but tasteless. The bread warm, but flat." Then at last, Capo Rushes stepped forward. She placed a small bowl before him. "Try this," she said. He tasted it, and tears filled his eyes. Salt. It was salt. And in that moment, he remembered her words long ago by the fire. "I love you, as much as fresh meat loves salt." Broken heart, his hand shook. His voice broke. "My child," he said, standing from the table. "I was wrong, so wrong." And she reached out and took his hand in hers. "I know," she said gently. And that was all. Right from that day forward, peace was mended, love was whole, and every meal in that house was seasoned with salt and something far deeper. Forgiveness. And love that had waited to be understood. Teeny tiny once upon a time, in a teeny tiny village, on the edge of a great wide moor, there lived a teeny tiny woman, in a teeny tiny cottage, with a teeny tiny garden, and a teeny tiny cat that purred like the wind through pine needles. She had teeny tiny furniture, and wore a teeny tiny bonnet, and drank tea out of a teeny tiny cup with a teeny tiny saucer. Fog one misty afternoon, the teeny tiny woman put on her teeny tiny shawl, tied her teeny tiny boots, and stepped out of her teeny tiny house for a walk on the moor. The grass was soft and springy beneath her feet. The air smelled of peat and heather, and the wind made teeny tiny swirls in the folds of her skirt. She wandered for quite a while, humming teeny tiny songs until at last she came to a teeny tiny churchyard. And there under a crooked yew tree with bark like wrinkled velvet she saw something sticking up from the mossy ground. She bent down, squinted, and there, just at the edge of the grass, was a teeny tiny bone. She tilted her head. "Now what," she said to herself, "is a teeny tiny bone doing in a teeny tiny churchyard like this?" She looked around. No one was there. Just the hush of wind and the whisper of crows in the distance. So she carefully picked up the teeny tiny bone, wrapped it in a teeny tiny handkerchief, and slipped it into her teeny tiny pocket. "I think," she said with a nod, "I'll make a teeny tiny bit of soup with this tonight, crescent moon," and with that, she turned and walked back across the moor, the sun already dipping low behind the hills, painting the world in misty gold and blue. As she reached her little cottage, the teeny tiny cat meowed a welcome. She stepped inside, lit a teeny tiny lamp, and took out a teeny tiny pot. And then she dropped the teeny tiny bone into it with a little splash. Droplet she added a pinch of salt, a dash of herbs, a teeny tiny clove of garlic, and as it began to simmer, she smiled. What a fine supper this will be. She curled up by the fire, reading a teeny tiny book as the stew bubbled gently on the stove. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows like someone softly whispering. But she paid it no mind. Not yet. Because something else, something teeny tiny, but strange, was on its way. That night, the teeny tiny woman finished her supper a gentle spoonful at a time, savoring the warm broth and quiet evening. The fire had crackled low, the cat had curled by the hearth, and the moonlight spilled through the window like a soft silver blanket. She cleaned her teeny tiny bowl, blew out the teeny tiny lamp, and tiptoed off to her teeny tiny bedroom with a teeny tiny yawn. She undressed quietly, folded her clothes neatly on a stool, and slid beneath the covers of her teeny tiny bed. The pillow was just right, the blanket warm. The ticking of the clock was steady and slow. The world was peaceful, until cold-faced just as she was drifting off, half in dream and half awake, she heard it. A sound, soft and slow, as if it came from the air itself. A voice. A teeny tiny voice, but not her own, and not from her cat. It said, "Ghost, give me my bone." The teeny tiny woman opened her eyes. "Did I dream that?" she whispered to herself, heart fluttering like a moth. She waited. Nothing. The room was still. So she pulled the covers a little higher and closed her eyes again. But then, the voice came once more, this time louder, this time closer. "Ghost, give me my bone." She sat bolt upright in her bed. The moonlight seemed colder now. The cat was wide awake too, ears perked, staring at the door. The woman swallowed hard. With just the wind, she whispered, but even as she said it, there came a knock. A slow, steady knock on her teeny tiny door. Not. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She just listened. Then a rattle at the window. The latch trembled as if touched by invisible hands. And again, "Ghost, give me my bone." Her heart beat louder than the clock. She clutched the blanket to her chin. The room seemed to hold its breath. And then slowly, softly, the door creaked open. The wind whispered in. The shadow shifted. And instead a teeny tiny figure, drifting, pale. Its voice a whisper, "Ghost, give me my bone." Candle, the teeny tiny woman gasped. But then she sat up tall, pulled her bonnet tight, and she said in her clearest, firmest voice, speaking take it, then wind, and just like that, the shadow vanished. The cold left the room. The air was warm again. The window closed on its own, and the teeny tiny bone was gone. Just gone. Presently the teeny tiny woman laid back down, a little startled, but strangely calm. The cat curled close beside her, and before long the house was quiet again. The fire burned soft. The stars twinkled above, and the teeny tiny woman slept a teeny tiny sleep with teeny tiny dreams of bones returned and peace restored. Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, in a small cottage at the edge of a quiet village, there lived a poor widow and her only son, a cheerful, curious boy named Jack. Their home was tiny, but it was filled with laughter, warm soup on cold nights, and a very old, gentle cow who gave milk each morning. But time had not been kind to them. The weather turned bitter, the fields stopped blooming, and their dear cow, though sweet and beloved, gave no milk anymore. One chilly morning, the widow placed her hand on Jack's shoulder and said gently, "Jack, my boy, we have no choice. You must take our cow to the market and sell her. Get the best price you can." Jack nodded, though his heart sank. He loved the old cow. She had been his friend since he was little. But he knew his mother was right. So off he went, leading the cow by fraying rope past the hedgerows through the forest path and toward the village square. The air was damp, birds sang sleepily in the trees, and Jack, though sad, hummed a soft tune as he walked. Just before he reached the market, he came across a curious-looking man dressed in a long green coat, with a beard that shimmered like moss in sunlight. The man smiled wide. "Good morning, lad," he said. "A fine beast you have there. Where are you headed?" "To the market," Jack replied. "She no longer gives milk, but I hope someone might still want her." The man's eyes twinkled. "No need to go all the way to market," he said. "I'll give you something better than money, something magical." Jack tilted his head. "Magical?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handful of beans. They were smooth, glossy, and shimmered with strange, deep colors: blue, violet, and gold. "These," the man whispered, "are magic beans. Plant them tonight, and by morning, well, you'll see." Jack's eyes widened. "Magic?" He looked at the cow, then at the man, then at the shimmering beans. Something inside him, that same spark that made him dream of dragons and heroes, told him to say yes. So he did. He traded the cow for 5 tiny beans. The man gave him a wink, tipped his mossy hat, and disappeared down a bend in the road as if he'd never been there at all. Jack walked home, his palm curled tightly around the beans, his heart thumping with both fear and a little bit of wonder. When he arrived home, his mother was waiting anxiously at the door. "Well, Jack," she asked, "where's the money?" Jack opened his hand, then showed her the beans. "Magic beans," he said quietly. His mother stared. Then her face turned pale. "Magic beans," she cried. "You gave away our only cow for beans." Before Jack could explain, she snatched the beans from his hand, threw them out the window, and with a storm of tears, sent him straight to bed without supper. Outside, the sky darkened, and the stars blinked gently overhead. Jack curled up beneath his thin blanket, eyes heavy with disappointment. But somewhere deep inside, he still wondered if the man had spoken the truth. And as the moon climbed high above the cottage, something extraordinary began to stir just beneath the soil where the beans had landed. The earth quivered. A faint green glow began to shimmer, and slowly, quietly as the world slept, a beanstalk began to grow. When the first morning light slipped through the shadows and tickled Jack's cheeks, he stirred in bed, rubbed his sleepy eyes, and stretched. His belly rumbled. He hadn't had any supper, and for a moment he remembered the scolding of the beans and the sadness. But then something caught his eye. A green glow filled the room. Strange shadows danced on the floor, and outside the window something massive loomed. Jack jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. His jaw dropped open. Where the beans had fallen the night before, there now stood a beanstalk. But not just any beanstalk. It was the tallest, thickest, most mysterious plant Jack had ever seen. Its stem twisted like a spiral staircase, covered in leaves the size of bed sheets, and it shimmered faintly as though kissed by stardust. It reached up into the sky, through the clouds, and far beyond what the eye could see. Jack's heart raced with wonder. "Magic beans," he whispered. Without waiting, without breakfast, Without even his shoes, Jack darted outside. He placed his hands on the beanstalk. It felt warm, alive, and humming with energy. He began to climb, higher and higher, past the rooftop of his cottage, past the birds flying the morning paths, past the sun-tipped treetops of the village. He climbed so high that the air turned cool and soft, and the clouds swirled around him like whipped cream. At last, after what felt like hours, Jack reached the top. And there, resting above the clouds, was a land unlike anything he had ever seen. A soft golden mist floated over the ground. The flowers shimmered with dew that sparkled like diamonds. The trees stretched taller than castle towers, and their leaves whispered secrets in the wind. But what caught Jack's eye the most was a castle. A grand, towering castle of pale grey stone, with windows as big as church doors and a front gate made of shining silver. Jack tiptoed across the soft mossy ground, his feet barely making a sound. He reached the castle gate and pushed it gently. It creaked open. Inside was cool and vast and echoing like stepping into a forgotten cathedral. He wandered through giant halls and beneath chandeliers made of polished crystal. At last, he reached a great kitchen where everything was oversized. Bowls as big as bathtubs, spoons like oars, and an oven as tall as a haystack. Jack's mouth watered at the smell of warm bread and roasted meats. But before he could step further, boom, 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 the ground shook. The plate on the shelf rattled, and from somewhere far down the hallway came a deep, rumbling voice. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman." Jack froze. His heart pounded in his chest. He darted beneath the enormous table and curled up behind a bread box the size of a trunk. Into the kitchen stomped a giant. He was as tall as 3 houses stacked high. His boots clanged like thunder, and his nose twitched in the air. "Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." But the giant's wife, a kind-eyed woman with a broom in one hand and flour on her apron, shushed him gently. "Oh, nonsense," she said. "There's no one here but you and me." The giant grumbled, sat down heavily, and soon forgot about the smell. He ate a meal that would feed a village, drank from a mug as big as a barrel, and at last he called for his treasures. From a cupboard, his wife brought out a small golden harp which played music all on its own, and then a hen. Not just any hen, a hen that laid golden eggs. Right before Jack's eyes, it cleft once and laid a shining, glowing egg of pure gold. The giant yawned, his belly full and his eyelids heavy. He placed the harp and the hen on the table, and with one final snore fell fast asleep. Jack, heart still racing, knew what he had to do. Slowly, quietly, he crept from beneath the table, tiptoed across the floor, and reached out for the hen. She blinked at him but made no sound. He tucked her gently under his arm, looked once more at the snoring giant, and began to run. Out of the kitchen, through the halls, back through the silver gate, and across the golden misty land to the top of the beanstalk. Behind him, he heard a distant roar. "Thief, thief, give me back my hen." The giant had woken. Jack climbed faster than he ever had before, down, down, through the clouds, past the birds, past the rooftops, down to the earth. His mother ran outside, just as Jack reached the bottom. "An axe," Jack cried. Quickly, she fetched it, wide-eyed and breathless, and Jack began to chop the beanstalk. Chop, chop, chop. The stalk shuddered. Chop, chop, crack. It groaned, splintered, and with one final swing crash, the beanstalk fell. Down came the giant, tumbling through the sky like a fallen star, but he vanished in a puff of cloud before he could hit the ground. Jack stood trembling, the golden hen in his arms, his mother wrapping him in a tearful hug. And so, from that day on, they never went hungry again. The hen laid golden eggs every morning. Their cottage became bright and warm again, and Jack's days were filled with laughter and stories of the land above the clouds. But the beanstalk never grew again, and Jack, though curious as ever, never saw the strange man in the green coat again. Some say he was a wizard. Some say he was a dream. But Jack always remembered that morning when the sky opened up and magic came climbing down from the stars. The story of the three little pigs. Once upon a time, in a quiet woodland clearing, there lived a mother pig and her three little piglets. They were sweet and cheerful, always playing in the mud, chasing butterflies and squealing with joy. But one day, the mother pig called her children close. Her voice was soft but serious. "My dear children," she said gently, "you have grown big and clever now. It's time you went out into the wide world to build homes of your own and seek your fortune." The three little pigs blinked up at her, surprised. But they were brave. They gave her hugs, kissed her snout, and set off down the winding forest path, each one whistling a little tune as they went. The first little pig was light-hearted and full of laughter. He spotted a man carrying a bundle of straw and thought, "A house of straw would be quick and easy. I could build it in no time and spend the rest of the day napping." So he traded a few shiny buttons with a bundle of straw home to himself as he stacked and tied, and by the time the sun was high overhead, his house was ready. It was a small, floppy thing with a thatched roof that danced in the wind and a little door made from woven twigs. "Oh, what fun," he giggled as he plopped down on a pile of hay inside. Now the second little pig was a little more thoughtful. He passed by a man carrying sticks. "A house of sticks would be stronger than straw," he said to himself, "and I'll still have time to rest before dinner." So he traded a shiny coin for a bundle of neat, straight sticks. He built a house with a firm little frame, a pointed roof, and a crooked wooden door. It wasn't fancy, but it stood firm enough in the breeze. He smiled and said, "That's good enough for me." Then, far ahead on the trail, the third little pig walked alone. He was quiet. He was clever. And he remembered what their mother had told them about the world. "Beware the big bad wolf," she had whispered. So when he saw a man pushing a cart full of red bricks, he said, "This is what I need." The bricks were heavy. The work was long, and the sun sank low in the sky before he laid the final tile. But at last his brick house stood tall and strong, with a chimney, a shuttered window, and a solid oak door. He dusted off his hoofs and sighed with pride. "Now this is a house that will keep me safe." And so, as night fell over the forest, the three little pigs went to bed, each in their very own home, dreaming sweetly of the day to come. But far off in the shadows, eyes gleamed yellow in the dark, and a soft, hungry growl rumbled through the trees. The big bad wolf was watching. The next morning, the forest was quiet. Sunlight filtered through the trees, and birds chirped softly on the branches. But the peace wouldn't last. Out from the shadows crept a figure, tall, furry, with long claws and sharper teeth. It was the big bad wolf, and he was very hungry. He sniffed the wind. My small piglet." His nose twitched. He followed the scent down the trail, past the trees, past the berry bush, and there, just ahead, a little house made of straw. The wolf licked his lips. Inside, the first little pig was humming to himself, lounging on his hay bed and nibbling an apple. Suddenly a knock on the door. Soft at first, knock, knock, knock. The piglet's ears perked up. "Who's there?" he squeaked. A deep voice growled from outside. Little pig, let me come in." The pig gasped. "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." The wolf growled low. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in." And he did. With one great gust of breath, whoosh, the straw house flew apart, hay tumbling through the air like feathers in a storm. The little pig squealed in fright and darted into the woods faster than he'd ever run before. He ran and ran until he reached his brother's house made of sticks. Let me in," he cried. "The big bad wolf is after me." The second pig opened the wooden door, and then they both tumbled, hearts pounding. They locked the door tight. They shut the shutters, and they hid beneath a quilt. But the big bad wolf was not far behind. His ears twitched. His teeth gleamed, and soon he was at the stick house door. Knock, knock, knock. Little pigs, let me come in," he growled. From inside came a nervous squeal. "Not by the hairs of our chinny chin chins." The wolf narrowed his eyes. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in." He drew in the biggest breath yet. His chest rose, his fur ruffled, and with one mighty gust whoosh, the house of sticks creaked and groaned, and then crash, it tumbled down in a heap. The two little pigs shrieked. They dashed through the wreckage, through thorns and brambles, all the way to their brother's brick house. The third pig opened the door wide. He pulled them inside. He slammed the door shut, and he bolted it tight. Then they all looked out the little window together. The forest was still, but far down the path came the sound of slow, steady footsteps. The big bad wolf was coming. The brick house stood tall and firm. Its windows glowed with the soft light of a fire inside. The three little pigs, safe at last, peeked out. And there between the trees came the big bad wolf. Step by step, slow and steady, his eyes glinting, his breath rising in puffs. He licked his lips once more, and then he knocked. Knock, knock, knock. Little pigs, let me come in." But from inside the brick house, the third pig answered calmly, "Not by the hair of our chinny chin chins." The wolf narrowed his eyes. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in." He puffed out his chest. He sucked in the cold forest air. He huffed and he puffed and he blew with all his might. Whoosh! But the house didn't budge. Not even a shiver. The brick stood firm. The wolf tried again. Another huff, another puff, and the fiercest blow yet. Whoosh! Still nothing. Not even a window pane rattled. Inside, the pigs huddled together, safe, warm, and no longer afraid. The wolf stumped and growled. "Fine," he snapped. "Then I'll climb up the roof, and I'll come down the chimney." And up he climbed, claw by claw, step by step, until he reached the top. But the clever third pig, he was ready. He had built a fire in the hearth, and hung a large iron pot over it. A pot filled with boiling water, bubbling and steaming. The wolf crept across the roof. He found the chimney. He crouched, and then he jumped. Down, down, down he slid. And splash! Right into the boiling pot. Yowla! With a scream and a yelp, the wolf shot back up the chimney like a rocket, smoke and soot trailing behind him. He leapt off the roof, ran through the woods, and was never seen again. Not in that forest. Not in that lifetime. Back in the brick house, the three little pigs cheered. They danced. They sang. They roasted apples by the fire and sipped hot tea. And from that day on, they lived together, safe and sound, in the warm little house of bricks. No more fear. No more running. Just laughter, peace, and cozy nights. And so, my sleepy friend, if ever you feel like the wind is blowing too strong, remember the little pig who built with care and courage. Because sometimes a well-built home, a warm fire, and a clever heart can keep even the biggest wolf away. And so, dear listener, we softly leave the adventures for tonight. Let her courage and cleverness inspire your dreams, filling them with hope and gentle bravery. Remember, you too hold magic in your heart and courage within your dreams. Sleep sweetly and rest easy until we meet again on another peaceful night with SleepyTime Stories. If you enjoyed tonight's gentle journey, please like, subscribe, and gently tap the notification bell so you never miss another cozy bedtime story. Share your thoughts in the comments below, or suggest the next magical story you'd like to drift off to. Thank you for joining me tonight. Sweet dreams, dear friend.